And we begin today with the election of 1912. In February of 1912, Roosevelt cried, "My hat is in the ring, and the fight is on, and I am stripped to the buff." A Taft-Roosevelt explosion was near in June of 1912 when the Republican convention met in Chicago. The Rooseveltites, who were about 100 delegates short of winning the nomination, challenged the right of some 250 Taft delegates to be seated. The contest was finally arbitrarily settled in favor of Taft. And Roosevelt adherents cried, "Fraud and naked theft." In the end, Roosevelt took his marbles and went home, and he and his delegates refused to vote. Taft triumphed and became the Republican nominee. The Democrats were jubilant over the disruptive Republican brawl. If they could come up with an outstanding reformist leader, they felt that they could win. This they found in Dr. Thomas Woodrow Wilson, once a mild conservative, but now a militant progressive. He began professional life as a brilliant academic lecturer on government. He had risen in 1902 to the presidency of Princeton University, and there he had achieved some sweeping educational reforms. He had been elected governor of New Jersey, and then, in 1912, nominated for the president by the Democratic Party. Wilson revealed irresistible reforming zeal, burning eloquence, superb powers of leadership, and a refreshing habit of appealing over the heads of scheming bosses to the sovereign people. Now Wilson's cause was unexpectedly supported by the old warhorse, William Jennings Bryan. Bryan has 4 times run for the presidency. This time he says, "I will not run again. Instead, I will support Wilson for the presidency." And Wilson is very appreciative of this. The Democratic platform pointed up Wilson's limited liberalism by coming out emphatically for reforms, including antitrust legislation, monetary changes, and tariff reductions. And here we have all 3 of the candidates. Roosevelt and Taft, former bosom buddies. Roosevelt had hand-picked Taft to be his successor. Here, the collar around his neck with the bell says TR, best of buddies. Now, that best of buddies has a huge rift in between it. And you have Wilson here pictured with William Howard Taft. And the Republican GOP elephant here facing off with the bull moose of the Republican Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party of Teddy Roosevelt. Yes, he has thrown his hat into the ring. And here you see a former best buddies now going at it. And Taft and Teddy, 1908, Roosevelt had handed the nomination to Taft, and he says, "There you are, Bill." And now, 4 years later, TR, with a gun at the nose of Taft, is saying, hey, come on, hand it back. And Taft is not handing it back. Roosevelt, being rejected by the Republicans, became a candidate for a third-party progressive Republican ticket. Roosevelt boasted that he felt as strong as a bull moose, and hence the bull moose took its place. I love this cartoon, absolutely love this top one. If you take the GOP, the Republicans, and divide them by the Bull Moose Party, it equals a Democratic victory. And here you have the progressives, the Bull Moose Party, and TR's Rough Rider hat here. His hat is still in the ring, he says, and he's making another dash for the White House. And here you see the Capitol off to the side. He became the candidate for the third-party progressive Republicans. They took on the nickname of the Bull Moose Party because Teddy had said he felt as strong as a bull moose. A jingle of the time went, I want to be a bull moose, and with the bull moose stand, with antlers on my forehead and big stick in my hand. Roosevelt and Taft were bound to slit each other's political throats. By dividing the Republican vote, they guaranteed a Democratic victory. Angered and rising to the fight, the once jovial Taft said, "Death alone can take me out now." He called this the presidential penitentiary. The last thing he wanted was to be president. He wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. But now that his former good bosom buddy was challenging him, he says, "Death alone can take me out now." He branded Roosevelt a dangerous egotist and a demagogue. A demagogue is someone who sees themselves as a savior. They have the solution for the problem. Roosevelt, fighting mad, assailed Taft as a fathead with the brain of a guinea pig. Roosevelt and his bull moosers also campaigned for women's suffrage and a broad program of social welfare, including minimum wage laws and socialistic social insurance. I love this drawing here of, once again, he is on the tail end of a train going from town to town, giving speeches as the train would stop in the local towns, and here a crowd of bull moosers have gathered to hear his speech, and they are all wearing their bull moose antlers when he shows up. Wilson's New Freedom, by contrast, looked backward to an older era of small enterprise. The Democrats shunned social welfare proposals and instead pinned their economic faith to competition. The heat of the campaigning cooled a bit when in Milwaukee, Roosevelt was shot in the chest by a fanatic. The Rough Rider had to suspend active campaigning for more than 2 weeks after delivering with bull moose style and gaminess and a bloody shirt his scheduled speech. So he is scheduled to give this speech in Milwaukee, and before he is able to give it, he is shot. And he just so happened to have in his pocket his spectacles, and the case that his spectacles were in his pocket, and his big old speech was in his pocket, folded in half. And so the bullet hit the glasses case, went through that first, went through the folded up speech, then through the shirt, and hit him in the ribs. Here is his x-ray with the bullet, and the arrow is pointing here, so the bullet must be here. He is shot, and his people are trying to take him immediately to the hospital. Oh, no, no, no. Teddy will have nothing to do with that. He insists, bloody shirt and all, on getting up on the stage and giving his speech anyway. It was a 1-hour speech. They did not ultimately remove the bullet. It was decided that to remove the bullet, which had fractured his 4th rib, would be more dangerous than to just leave it where it was. But Teddy, true to his style, instead of worrying about his own health, he had to deliver that 1-hour speech before they could drag him off the stage and off to the hospital. Well, Wilson showing great, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word? Sportsmanship, not sportsmanship. There's a different word. He refused to campaign for the 2 weeks that Roosevelt was out of commission. He said it would not be fair for me to take advantage of Roosevelt's injury and campaign while my opponent cannot campaign. And so he did not campaign during the 2 weeks Roosevelt was convalescing. But ultimately, he would win quite handily, 435 electoral votes. Now the big question was, who would come in second? Roosevelt and Taft, I think, pretty well knew that by splitting the Republican vote, they didn't stand a chance. But who would be more popular? Who could win the popularity contest? And Roosevelt definitely showed that he won the popularity contest. He won 88 electoral votes to Taft's 8. Oh, that's embarrassing. You've just been president of the United States for 4 years, and you're running again. You're the incumbent, and all you can come up with is 8 electoral votes, 4 from Vermont and 4 from Utah. Oh, my goodness. Now, in the popular vote, it's a little bit different. He had 23%, and Roosevelt had 27%. But it is in the electoral that counts. While winning 82% of the electoral vote, in the popular vote, Wilson only won 42%. That therefore makes him a minority president. He has not won a majority of the popular vote. And that puts him in a much more weakened position than someone coming in with a majority of the nation behind him. He knows that. The last lame duck months of William Howard Taft's administration, he puts through the 16th Amendment. And this made it lawful to have a federal income tax. This was passed in February of 1913. Back then, you left office in March 4th. The new president took office on March 4th. And so in February, the last month of his time in office, the 16th Amendment is put through to the Constitution. So, every April 15th, when you are standing in line at the post office to send off your income tax, who are you going to thank for that? Big Bill Taft. He is the president that put through the federal income tax. Now, all of the money for the government does not come from just the tariff, the duties that are collected on imports, but instead from the taxes collected from the American public, the federal income tax. And we'll discuss that when we hit Wilson's administration. Meanwhile, Taft the man. As mentioned earlier, he is our first golfing president. And his wife is Helen Taft. She was the pusher in the family. She really wanted to be first lady. She wanted her husband's success. She did not have any interest in being the wife of a judge. He ultimately will gain the two highest posts in the nation. He is the only president in the United States to have achieved the two highest posts. Ooh, that is a good Jeopardy question. Who is the only president to have achieved the two highest posts? Supreme Court Justice and President of the United States, William Howard Taft. And there you see William Howard Taft in the center. Very brilliant man. Unfortunately, Helen, the one who wanted so desperately to become First Lady, suffers a stroke very shortly, only 10 weeks after she becomes First Lady, which rendered her speech unintelligible. And it would take a very long time for her to recover from this. And so she did not get to enjoy the duties of being First Lady as she would have so much loved. And his picture when he graduated from Yale College with his Bachelor of Arts. And a picture of him later in life on a horse. I love this one. Makes him look like a mountain man. That huge fur coat. And he did like those handlebar mustache. And there he's campaigning, giving a real speech. William and Helen Taft at a baseball game. And, oops, sorry. No, wrong way. Taft was the first president to open up the baseball season by tossing out the first ball. That is now very common for the president, an honor for the president to toss out the first ball beginning the baseball season. And that does not mean just once in their administration. They get to do that quite a few times during their administration. So this is one time, this is another time. You do serve 4 years, sometimes 8 years. And some more golfing pictures. Oops, come on. Man. Oh, I was afraid it would do this. It was doing this earlier, and now it's still doing it again. Mr. and Mrs. Taft had 3 children, 1 daughter, and 2 sons. I love this one. That is one big size pizza. And Taft and his wife Helen and 3 children and 3 spouses. And in this picture, I counted a total of 11 grandkids. Now, how many in total they have? Some of these are still quite young, so who knows how many were added after this photo, but in this one they had 11 grandkids. And here, William Howard Taft and his wife Ellen. And President Harding is the one who appoints Taft to the Supreme Court. And here we have Taft, Harding, and Robert Todd Lincoln. He is the son of Abraham Lincoln, the only one of his sons that live to adulthood, and he will serve in the United States government. And he was still alive, and this is a picture of him. He was, of course, present and honored at the opening of the Lincoln Memorial after his father, of course. And the Taft House in Ohio. Here, this whole level is underground, partial basement, so a 3-story house, quite a nice large house. And 2 sons and a daughter when they were younger, most likely prior, yes, quite a bit prior to his becoming president. And true enough, they did have to install a new bathtub. This was Taft's bathtub installed while he was in the White House. He did get stuck in the White House bathtub, and they did have to install a new tub just for him. And some postage stamps honoring William Howard Taft. One from Liberia here, one from Panama, and the other 3 from the United States. And he is buried at Arlington Cemetery, he and his wife. And their tombstone, his tombstone, William Howard Taft, President of the United States, Chief Justice of the United States, and then his wife's name as well here. Yes, 2 highest posts in the United States government. And we begin now with Wilson. Here we have the outgoing Taft and the incoming President Wilson. Wilson is the only president with an earned PhD. His PhD was in political science. In the election of 1912, William Jennings Bryan swung his support for Wilson instead of challenging him. So Wilson made him Secretary of State. This is a very high position because many Secretary of States, particularly in the beginning of U.S. history, were Secretary of States and then later presidents. So this was a launching board into the presidency. Now, William Jennings Bryan's days of being president are over, but still, this is a very big plum to be given as a position to someone, to make them your Secretary of State. Wilson was born in Virginia, the mother of presidents, in 1856, prior to the ending of the Civil War. His father was a Presbyterian minister. He studied law, but he didn't like that, so he got his PhD in politics. He became a professor at Princeton. His whole life is characterized by rigidity, crusading, and righteous rule. Excuse me, let's get you, I guess I needed to have gotten you through his inauguration. Here is Wilson and Taft. And here is the podium where the swearing in and the speeches all take place. And here is Wilson being sworn in, and Wilson delivering his first inaugural address. And as I said, his whole life is characterized by rigidity, crusading, and righteous rule. He was very brittle and inflexible. He started out life as a professor at Princeton, then became president of Princeton. To get him out of Princeton because he was so inflexible, they talked him into running for politics. His wife was a minister's daughter, and they had a very close relationship. Unfortunately, she died after the start of his first term, and he was extremely devastated. He did, though, remarry. He was always dignified. He never let his hair down, although he loved puns and charades. To get him out of the university, they talked him into running for politics, I mentioned. He will serve as one-term governor of New Jersey before he will be the Democratic candidate in 1912 for the presidency. This is sort of like Grover Cleveland. He had been one-term governor of New York before he was run as a Democratic presidential candidate. Everyone was saying, Grover Cleveland, who? Same thing here. Everyone is saying, Woodrow Wilson, who? One-term governor of New Jersey? Who is that? He is known as a Crusader president. He was dynamic, forceful. He wants to lead Congress. Teddy had led Congress. Taft had sat back and was passive, and Congress had led. Now Wilson's back in there, and he wants to lead. But Congress does not want to be led. He would not compromise, and as such, at the end of his term, he would suffer a stroke. And the remaining months of his presidency, his wife would actually run the White House. She is known as the female or the woman president. He will die in 1924, 4 years after leaving the White House, after the end of his term. And we will stop at this point and pick up with his 3 main goals in the next segment.